making. So far we've talked about lots of different fire starting methods, lots of different tools that you can use to start a fire. We've also talked a lot about tinder. We've talked about artificial tinder that you can bring from home or make ahead of time. We've also talked about tinder that you can find out in the wilderness, stuff that works really well to get a fire going. Tinder is incredibly important to starting a fire. It might be the most important step, is getting that first initial little flame going. But if you don't know how to sustain that flame, if you don't know how to keep that flame going and make it grow into a nice big warm fire, that's only half the battle. So here we're going to talk about how to build a fire. What do you do once you get that first initial flame? How do you build that up into a good fire that you don't have to worry about that fire going out? It's going to be nice and strong and hot. It can provide heat for you. It can provide cooking, the ability to cook. It can provide the ability to heat up and boil water to make it safe to drink. It can give you light to see by. It can keep away insects. It can work as a signaling device. So as we know, fire is extremely important. So here I'm going to talk about what is it going to take to build a fire from that first little flame that we get. Knowing how to build a fire is a lot like knowing how to bake a cake. There's a real recipe to it, and there's certain steps that you need to follow. If you don't follow those right steps, if you don't follow the recipe, you're not going to end up with a good product. So the first thing that we need to make a fire, the first ingredients that we need to build a fire, of course, is lots and lots of fuel. In this case, of course, most often you're going to be using wood. So what makes good firewood? First and foremost, firewood needs to be dead and dry. Using living materials or recently downed trees is not going to work very well. It has a lot of moisture in it. When you're making a fire, moisture is your number one enemy, so you want dry, dead wood. An easy way to determine if your wood is dry enough is to do something we call the snap test. It's very simple. You basically just take a piece of wood that you're considering using as firewood, and you want to test break it. So give it a snap. This one, see how it sticks together like that? It's not a clean, sharp crack. This is not terribly great firewood because this still has some moisture in it. So when I go to break this wood, it should come apart in two pieces easily, and I should hear a nice sharp crack. So by comparison, there we go. When you hear that nice sharp crack, that's good dry wood, and that's going to make good firewood when you hear that. So always do a quick snap test on all the pieces of wood that you go collect, just to make sure that you're not going to add moist or wet wood to your fire, and that's going to put it out. Aside from finding nice dead dry wood, what you're also looking for is wood of varying different sizes. Now, to get a fire started, remember when we used our tinder is the smallest, tiniest, fluffiest material that we can find. And we always, when we're building a fire, we always want to start at the tiniest, smallest material and work our way up little by little by little. So, you don't want to go out and just collect twig by twig by twig. What you want to do is, we always use the phrase, work smarter, not harder. So instead of going out to the woods to look for firewood and picking up one twig and picking up another twig and picking up another twig, go ahead and grab a whole large branch that has tons of different twigs already on it. Once again, making sure it's dead and dry. But if you grab a whole entire branch that's dead and dry, you have every size firewood to get a fire started that you need on here. So the first level of firewood that we're looking for is dry twigs that are about the thickness of a matchstick. So the first guide you want to use when looking for firewood, you want to get a good pile of wood no thicker than a matchstick. That's the first ingredient to build a fire. Moving on up the line, the next size of wood that we're looking for is wood that's about as thick as a pencil. You know, something you'd use in school to write with. You want the next step in fire building after the matchstick size wood is pencil size wood. You want to get a nice good pile of that. And finally, to get a good fire sustained, at least in the beginning, the next size wood you're looking for is about as thick as your thumb or as thick as a fat magic marker, something like that. So what you're looking for is find all three sizes of that wood so that you can use those different ingredients in your recipe to build the fire. Another really important thing about fire making, especially in an outdoor survival situation, is if you are wanting to build a fire that's going to last the night to keep you warm, you don't want to have to go looking for more firewood in the dark when you can't see, right? So it's important to gather a lot of firewood at first. A general rule of thumb If you want that fire to last all night, gather 3 times more wood than you think you'll need. That way, you're playing it on the safe side. You have extra firewood around in case something happens. You don't want to have to go out into the woods in the dark looking for more firewood. So, gather a nice, huge, huge, huge pile of good, dry firewood if you want that fire to keep you warm throughout the whole night. So let's talk more about getting that fire started from the beginning. Once you've found a good tinder, or you have a good tinder you use, you're going to need to feed that first flame that you get from that tinder. You need to feed that first flame with the appropriate firewood. So we said we're going to use matchstick wood. So basically, you're going to take a branch and just process it down. You're going to take all the smallest pieces, gather them up, snap them off, but basically this is part of your recipe. You want to gather up wood that's all of the same size or similar size. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to make a pile of matchstick sized wood ready to go for our fire. Alright, so I've now processed my wood into 3 distinct different piles. I have my matchstick sized wood here. I have a nice bundle of good matchstick wood. I have pencil thickness wood ready to go right here. And over here I have my marker or thumb thickness wood. So these are our first ingredients to get that first flame going when we're trying to build a fire. Alright, to get our fire started here, I'm going to go ahead and use some natural tinder. This is a couple of fluffy seed heads from the Phragmites plant. Doesn't really matter what tinder you use, as long as it's a good tinder, of course. The rest of the recipe is the same. You want to start out small, work your way up to bigger, bigger, bigger sticks. So let's go ahead and get our tinder lit. Now, if you have birch bark in your area, the absolute best thing to add once you get your first flame on the tinder is birch bark. Birch bark, I call it the gasoline of the forest. So if you have birch bark on hand, by all means, you should definitely add some onto your tinder as soon as you get it lit. But we're going to pretend that we don't have any on hand, and you don't need it. If you have the right recipe, if you start out with the right types of materials and process your materials into different size piles, you don't need anything like this as an accelerant on your fire. The fire will get going all on its own. Alright. So a lot of times they recommend building a fire first, building basically a teepee shaped fire. When you have nice thin materials like these, I find it unnecessary to try to build this into a teepee first. We're just going to get our tinder lit, put this on top, then we're going to start building our teepee with our slightly larger material. There we go. We don't want to put on too much at first. We don't want to smother our tinder once our tinder is lit. I'm going to hold it just right above there. Once that starts to catch, once those sticks start to catch without the tinder being lit, then we can kind of just move that around, add to it. There we go. Alright, once our smallest material starts to catch on its own, that's when we can start adding our pencil thick wood, and we can use that lighter material as a base to start building our teepee. So basically we're just going to lay our material all around the outside, coming to a point in the center. At this point, we don't want to rush things. We just want to place the wood where the flames are strongest. And we don't want to smother it. If our fire is struggling a tiny bit, don't keep putting wood on. Just want to let it do its own thing, and that flame is going to dry out the material enough to light it. So now that that's catching a little more, we can pick up the pace and add sticks on at a slightly faster rate. Always being careful not to put too much on to smother it. Fire likes to climb, right? Fire likes to go up. So you're looking to put material above the hottest parts of the flames. That's why that teepee shape is the best for getting a fire started. Now it's starting to blaze. So at this point, we've pretty much used most of our pencil thickness wood up. Now we can start moving on to our thumb or marker size wood, keeping that teepee shape going. All right, at this stage in the game, we're starting to build a heart to our fire. What I mean is the smallest materials that we started to use first are now almost burned through underneath, forming hot little coals. So those hot coals, that's the heart of our fire. So at this point we can add a little oxygen to really get that stoked. Remember, our three ingredients that make fire are fuel, heat, and oxygen. So when I blow, I'm adding more oxygen to the recipe. And at the right stage, at the right time, if you add some oxygen, you're going to get some good results. All right, so at this stage, our fire is pretty much sustaining. Not wind or a little bit of rain or a little bit of snow is going to put this guy out immediately. So from here, we can start adding larger and larger pieces of wood. Remember, our goal is to start small, get bigger and bigger and bigger. So from those marker size pieces of wood, I'm going to start adding broom handle size pieces of wood, or slightly thicker. Now, aside from the material that you use, making sure that it's nice and dry, making sure it's not damp or moist, it's also important to know what types of wood that you use. So what I'm throwing on here is mostly pine. Now, pine catches quickly, it burns hot, but it doesn't burn for a long time. If you really want to get a good fire sustained all night long, you probably want to start out with lighter woods, softer woods like pine and poplar and things like that. But then eventually you're going to want to start to add hardwoods, oak, maple, cherry. These hardwoods, they burn hot and they burn for a very long time. So if you don't want to be stoking your fire all night long, adding wood every couple minutes, then you want to put some good hardwood logs on that fire. All right, once we get a good roaring fire going like we have here, you can see the any moisture that is in this wood, any wetness there is quickly being evaporated in the form of steam. You can kind of hear the hissing. So we have a good hot fire going. So at this stage, we can start to add fairly thick pieces of wood. This one is a little bit thicker than my wrist, but as long as you pick the right spot, we start to add those thicker pieces. So remember, fire is all about starting small, starting out teeny tiny with your tinder, slowly progressing up to matchstick size, pencil thickness, marker thickness, and then once you get that going, then you can start to add larger pieces of wood from there.